Hello. So cold to the bone. Been out all day horsing, just got in. Um, I need to share with you before we get into politicking. Does anybody else have the just got in stress? So it's a bit where you open the door, having spent a busy day doing something, and you go in straight into what needs doing, whether that be unloading the dishwasher or taking the washing out the washing machine or taking the washing in off the washing line or putting the shopping away, which then requires emptying the fridge, which then requires emptying the bins, which then you have to go and feed the dogs because you've got to take the cat litter out while you take, all of those things. It feels sometimes just coming in can be so overwhelming and so stressful that I dread it. It's a bit like when you've done the shopping and you've got the shopping in the car and you know that you're so pleased that you've got some food to go in the fridge and some um, stuff to clean the bathroom with, that kind of stuff. But you also know that by putting it away, that's a mammoth task in itself because you're going to have to undo before you can do. I realise that's a massive tangent, but I had to share that with you because I came in and had to do all of the above and felt so totally overwhelmed. I was like, oh! Anyway, we digress. On the politicking, there is Bridget Phillipson talking about Labour's high and rising standards. Now, this bit I took exception to. Labour demands high and rising standards for all children, not just a lucky few. But she doesn't mean all children, because if she meant all children, that's 100%. And Bridget Phillipson works for the state sector. Her words, not mine. So she represents the 93% of children who were in the state sector. Then she talks about not just the lucky few. Now, what she wants you to take from that is not just the lucky few who are in independent education. Completely railroading why they might be in independent education. And they may be in independent education because the state system, the dogs are going bonkers, because the state system failed them, didn't work for them, wasn't accessible for them. So would you say that they were lucky? I think they might say otherwise. I mean, they might be very grateful that they are no longer in that system and that they are in the independent sector, and therefore it is a sanctuary for them, and it's a place where they are getting the education that they feel comfortable with in the setting that they feel comfortable in, with the support network that they feel grateful to have. Now, I don't think any of us would argue that that's not a good thing. That is a good thing. And I think as parents, we in the main all want to set out to make sure that our children have the best possible education that we can afford them, and that we can support them with, and that we can be alongside them with. So high and rising standards tends to be something that as a parent is instilled from when your baby is born. You want the best for them, and you want the best for them, and you want them to achieve to the best of their abilities. Yet Labour is demanding, and again, it's another aggressive use of language, demanding high and rising standards. Well, we then have to sort of question, what are these high and rising standards? Whose are these high and rising standards? Because what your high and rising standards are might be very different to what my high and rising standards are. And these are Labour's high and rising standards. Yet if we look politically at the graph of Labour's high and rising standards, the standards actually drop significantly when the Labour Party are in power. And then the educational standards rise significantly when it is, in our case, the coalition or the Tories in power. But factually, we have in front of us the graphs that show us that educationally, when the Labour Party is in the helm, those standards do drop. Now, of course, we will ignore that because we don't want to look at the truth. We don't let the truth get in the way of a nice headline. But we pretend that the past never happened. We certainly don't look at Wales and what's happening in Wales, which is just devastating for all the children there who have been under the Labour education system and been so woefully failed by it. Again, not my words, the children and the parents and many of the teachers in Wales back that one up. So it's interesting that Bridget Phillipson talks about this, and she can't resist but to get a little snip in, not just the lucky few. She can't resist but to do that. Yet it shows to me an even more obvious statement of her lack of the grasp of what she's talking about. And she wants to segregate, doesn't she? She's always desperate. She's desperate to segregate these kids versus those kids, the lucky few versus the not lucky few. And she's suggesting that it's only the children in the independent sector that have had high and rising standards. Well, if I'm a teacher in the state sector, that really annoys me. That really annoys me because I haven't yet met a teacher who has not wanted the very best for their children. Simply haven't, in both the state and the independent sector. I have not met a teacher who has gone into this profession so that the children can come out with medium standards. Ever. They didn't go to university and to teacher training college to do that. They went so that they could give the children the very best of their knowledge and the access to the education that we as a country deem appropriate for children. That's a totally different argument. But I've never met a teacher in the state sector that's gone, oh, well, we won't have high and rising standards. That's only for the independent sector. Yet here's Bridget Phillipson saying, no, it's not. No, it's they've had the high and rising standards, but we want them as well now. And you can only get them because Labour is demanding them. Well, that's just not true. That's really divisive. And it isn't true. And to the point where people say, am I an anti-Labour individual? Yeah, on most policies, yes. On most policies I am. But I'm also an anti not telling the truth individual. That really jars me. And it is simply not true. But the narrative, the picture that it gives for everyone is that unless you're in independent or unless you have been in the independent sector up until Labour came in, you simply didn't get access to high and rising standards. But now Bridget Phillipson is at the helm, you will. But then we don't talk about what they are and we don't talk about how we're implementing them other than attainment hubs and attendance hubs. Now, you know my thoughts on attendance hubs. We need to look at why children don't want to go to school. We need to understand why they don't want to be in their educational establishment. And again, 9 times out of 10, that isn't because they just can't be bothered. 9 times out of 10, it isn't just because they'd rather sit on a cold park bench. 9 times out of 10, there's a very, very good reason why children don't want to be in school. And it has got nothing to do with just can't be bothered. And it has everything to do with the components, the bits of the jigsaw that make up that child to be that individual. They're not all in the right place because something's missing. And whether that be they've got a big bit of anxiety that is really stopping them getting over the school gates. They can't do it because they're so nervous about what's going to happen. Maybe they're being bullied. Maybe they're not having an easy time at home. There's so many reasons why children don't want to go to school. But really, genuinely, I think you'd go a long way to find it just because I can't be asked. Yet that's what we are presenting from the Labour Party. So we're cracking down on attendance. We've got attendance hub, behaviour hubs. You will go into that hub and you will learn how to behave and you will learn how to attend school and you will be punished if you don't. Doesn't really sound overly progressive to me. Sounds slightly Victorian, if I'm truly honest. So these are my musings today on Bridget Phillipson's latest announcement. And I feel I always talk about her and do we need any examples as why I don't think she's the right person for the job? There you go. We've got an even bigger misunderstanding of what it is that the educational setting children and teachers need. And it's not Bridget and her tweets. And can we say that we had a £90 million social media budget for this kind of stuff? I'd want a refund. £90 million of taxpayers' money went into the Department for Education social media budget, and we get this. I could spend that £90 million really quickly and really easily within schools. I could absolutely inject that money into the state system and spend it in a way that it would benefit children. Yet the Department for Education are choosing to spend that money in a way where it pulls families apart, pulls communities apart, pulls teachers apart, pulls educational establishments apart by drawing a line down the middle and having a group on this side and a group on that side. Diversity and inclusion clearly doesn't exist in education, does it? And there we go. Here endeth. I'm actually so cold, I'm shivering. I don't have my hot water bottle on and I can't feel my fingers, so I'm going to go and do some washing up to reheat myself. Please like, subscribe and share. Please like, subscribe and share. And I have no doubt there will be lots of missives to talk about tomorrow in the budget. It's going to be a meaty day.